Let's now conditionally display and hide the new friend form. So basically the functionality that we're looking for is clicking on this button will display the form and change the text to close, and then when we click again, it will just hide the form again. So let's think about this. Something should change in the UI as we click this button, right? Or in other words, the UI needs to be re-rendered as a result of the event of clicking that button. And so that is a very good sign that we need a new state variable. So let's go back here and then let's think about where we actually need that state variable. Well, basically we want to display and hide this form here based on that state variable. And where do we do that? So where do we display the form? Well, it is right here. So right here in the app component. And so this is where we now place our new piece of state. So let's call it show add friend and set show add friend. We could, of course, have used some shorter variable names here, but you shouldn't be afraid of making your variables pretty descriptive. So use state, and by default, the form should be hidden. And so we set this to false. And once again, it's important that VS Code automatically imported useState from React. So make sure you have that line right there. So we have the first step of creating the state variable with the useState hook. Next up, let's use it. And we will use it to conditionally render this piece of JSX. So just this one component here. And for that, we can again use the AND operator with short circuiting. So show add friend and form add friend. And so now it is gone. So that's no longer here, but if it was true, then it should show up. And indeed, there it is. Okay, and with that in place, let's now go to the third step, which is updating the state. So when do we update the state? Well, it is when we click here on the button. So that's this button right here. And so let's again specify the onClick handler. Now, of course, this button component here doesn't have the onClick property, right? Only the native HTML elements, so for example this div here, or the actual button does have the onClick property. So let's actually cut it from here and place it a bit closer to the app because, or actually even before, because this is our only reusable component. So let's place it a bit separately. But anyway, as I was saying, this button here can of course accept the onClick prop because it is an HTML element basically. Not technically, but we can think of it as that. So here we can say onClick, but again, our custom button component doesn't have that prop. However, of course, we still want to specify onClick here. Right? And so what we can do is simply, well, accept that here as a prop. And this is actually exactly what we did when we built our first reusable button in the steps component. Remember that? But anyway, now here it's as simple as then passing that onClick right here. And now all we have to do is to pass in the function that we want to be executed when the click happens. So we will create a new function called handle show add friend. So let's copy that. And then, as always, let's create a new event handler function right here. So what should happen here? Well, we want to change the show add friend state, and for that we use the setter function. And what we want to do is to always set the show add friend to the opposite as it is right now. Or in other words, the new state will depend on the current state. And so, as always, or not always, but as many times, we use a callback which gets as an input the current state, and I will just call it show here. And then the new state will be the opposite of that. Again, any name here would work, but well, we don't have to write the entire thing here. Let's just go for something short. And if I click here, beautiful. So that works perfectly. And now all we have to change is the text here when we click. So now when the form is open, it should say close. And so that's just some more conditional rendering right here in the button actually. So let's wrap this here into JavaScript mode, and then let's say show add friend. If so if it is currently true, then we want to display close. And otherwise, then this other string here, which says add friend. Give it a save, and yes, it says close. And now back to the original add friend. Nice. So we are now able to display and hide the form, but of course the form doesn't work yet. And so let's take care of that in the next video.